Good morning. Welcome to King's Report, 18th day by the Heavenly Calendar. Tim Miller sitting in for the second king of Tanguk. And of course, today we're going to not do the news, but rather we're going to do something from Father's Words. A couple of housekeeping items. One, just a brief update on Hak Jahan. She was supposed to appear, last Monday. She said, I'm sick. So I said, okay, well, then Thursday, 11th, that'll be tomorrow. But then she said, I'm still sick. And so now the special counsel has given her a third day, and that is next Monday, the 15th. And when that was announced, um, uh, the a reporter asked, well, what happens if she doesn't show up? Are you going to ask a court to issue an arrest warrant? And the special counsel said, well, this is not the time to be talking about that. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, that possibility is on the table, but they wouldn't say, "Hey, no, we don't care if she comes or not. We're not going to issue an arrest warrant." They're never going to say that. One thing we do know for certain is that the special counsel is not going to let her drag this out forever. And I can't help but comparing the situation to True Father when he um, heard that the grand jury in New York had returned an indictment against him for alleged tax evasion. What did he do? He was in Korea at the time, and he got back to New York just as quickly as he could. Pretty much, I think on the next plane or something. And so he dealt with that situation very aggressively. He did not try to avoid. He did not check himself into a hospital. I said, "Oh, I'm sick." No, no, he did not do that. So there is I think, unavoidable comparison there. Anyway, we'll see what happens next Monday now. Second thing, I see that some people are confused about the date for the um, Foundation Day. 25th is correct. And we get this confusion once in a while because people uh, don't understand the heavenly calendar and also don't understand the lunar calendar that's behind it. And the thing about the lunar calendar, all right, is that it's different depending on which time zone you are in. Okay, because the lunar months go from new moon to new moon. All right, and the new moon, of course, occurs at a particular point in time. Particular point in time. But at that particular point in time, the date and the time on the planet Earth, right? The date on the planet Earth, there are going to be two dates on the planet Earth, right? There are going to be two dates on the planet Earth. It's going to be the 24th on one day. It's going to be the 25th. It's going to be the 24th, or I guess, let's see, the first day of August is, okay, is the 22nd. Okay, so at, at, at the next at the next new moon, at the next new moon, at that particular point in time, some parts of the Earth it's going to be September 22nd. Some parts of the Earth it's going to be September 21st or 23rd, I guess. Or anyway, okay, 20, no, first. So anyway, it's different. It's different. But the heavenly calendar is based on what? Based on the Korean lunar calendar. All right. So it doesn't matter what time zone you are in with the heavenly calendar. With the lunar calendar, it does matter. With the heavenly calendar, it does not matter which time zone you are in. It's on the same day. It's on the same day. It's not 24th for some people and 25th for some other people. No, it's all going to be on September 25th. All right. So please don't be confused. And um, uh, I'm not sure what to do. I mean, I could tell you the easiest thing is to do is to go to the Korean National Astrological Observatory. And if you can figure out that page, they tell you uh, about the lunar calendar, the Korean lunar calendar there. But I'm not sure they have that in English or not. But anyway, trust me, September 25th. Says here, right here on my smartphone. Okay. August, the eighth month, fourth day is September 25th, not the 24th. Okay. All right. So that taken care of. Let's take a look at this speech today. And this is a speech that Father gave in 1987, and on the occasion of the Day of Victory of Love. Now, the Day of Victory of Love is a day, it's a very special day. This was the day that Hung Jin-nim passed into the spirit world, and Hung Jin-nim is the second son of True Father and Hak Ja-han. And he, as I think almost all of you will know very well, he was in a traffic accident in upstate New York, and he passed away as a result of that. And if you look at the Cheonseonggyun, there's a section where Father talks about Hung Jin-nim, and he talked about the significance of his sacrifice. And also he talks about Hung Jin-nim's position in the spirit world. And actually he says some pretty incredible things. It's in the section that's titled, I think, A True Family in the Spirit World, or Spirit World and True Family. Anyway, you can look it up. I don't want to go into that today. I'll do that. Perhaps we'll have another chance to do that. But I want to go straight into this speech. But yeah, let's not go into that today. But it's actually pretty incredible. Okay. All right. Let's see. So this is January 2nd, 1987, at the World Mission Center in Grand Ballroom. World Mission Center, of course, is 46, was it? 41, 40. Anyway, it's the New Yorker Hotel, what we know of as the New Yorker Hotel, although that's not what it is anymore, but New Yorker Hotel. Or maybe it is still that. On 8th Avenue and 34th Street, I believe, in Manhattan. And here, Bo Hee-pak is the translator. Okay. Let's see. And I picked this speech because he goes into some biographical information that I think you'll find interesting here later on in the speech. But anyway, let's start at the beginning. As you already know, there are certain requirements in the process of fulfilling God's restoration course. This is the law of indemnity. As you also know, after World War II, the United States had the opportunity to unite with the entire world, especially the Judeo-Christian societies, in order to facilitate the final fulfillment of God's dispensation. And Father is referring to the fact that which he has apparently not mentioning here, but as mentioned elsewhere, where 1945 to 1952, this was a critical period where if Christianity had received him as the Messiah in 1945, following the end of World War II, then Father could have been part of the formation of the United Nations, and he could have worked with the United States, and he could have brought about Cheonryuk, he says, during that 7-year period. I don't think he means that all sin would have been wiped away from the earth, or that all the world, maybe he means that all the world would have been blessed, yes. But still, the framework, I think, is what he means. That's my understanding. The framework for Cheonryuk would have been established, and the rest of would have just followed automatically. But of course, that didn't happen. During World War II, America was in the position of the Adam nation on the heavenly side, while England was the Eve nation and France was the Archangel nation. On the satanic side, there was Germany as Adam, Japan as Eve, and Italy as the Archangel. Why were Great Britain and Japan in the Eve positions? They are island nations, which is a more feminine posture than the continent, which is larger and therefore more masculine. Furthermore, the United States is like a son to Great Britain, the mother country. This ties in with the prophecy of the coming of the Messiah through the body of a woman or through a mother's womb. And of course, here he's talking about island and continent, but of course the peninsular nation obviously is the Adam nation because it is um, um, similar to the male's penis. The fall of man took place between Adam, Eve, and the archangel. According to the law of cause and effect, that lineup on the worldwide scale would again have to occur in the last days. And this is something that I think may be unique to Father's theology, where he says, okay, certain patterns are established. A certain pattern was established in the Garden of Eden. And then that pattern carries forward then to the family level, to the tribal level, to the ethnic group level, to the national level, and to the world level. And so he's saying that in the world wars, then both World War I and World War II, as we see in the Divine Principle, these relationships that were present in the Garden of Eden, and the patterns that were established in the Garden of Eden were or had to be recreated so that so that restoration could happen, so that indemnity could be paid on the worldwide level. Then, in Garden of Eden, we just had the family, but now you have a whole world with billions of people on the earth, and so you have to deal with those billions of people in terms of nations. The fall of man took place between Adam, Eve, and the archangel, according to the law of cause and effect. That lineup on the worldwide scale would have to occur in the last days. Thus, we now have the Adam nation, Eve nation, and archangel nation. World War II was the ultimate war to fulfill the final chapter of the human dispensation. And here, I think we often seem to interchange the words dispensation and providence. Anyway, there was no nation untouched or uninvolved in that war. People of many nations shed blood. And yes, the World War II was fought on all continents. Even in Africa, there was uh, actual military action going on between the different colonies of the different European nations. Another important rule has worked throughout history. Satan always initiates attacks. World War II was no exception. It was initiated by Germany and Japan. At that time, the nation of Korea was under Japanese occupation. I wonder if we really said occupation. I think we in the West, I think in English, um, and maybe Bohipak misspoke here. It wasn't just occupation. It was a rule, and it was annexed. Korea was annexed to become part of Japan, just like the United States annexed Hawaii or annexed Alaska, made those places part of the United States, states in the United States. So similarly, in 1910, Japan annexed Korea. So it wasn't just a colonization, it wasn't just an occupation, it was an annexation, and it was, so many Koreans use the word gangjong, which means the forcible governance or forcible conquering, something like that. So that's kind of difficult to express in English, I guess. But so we can use occupation. Please understand that it wasn't just an occupation. Occupation seems like a more passive thing, but it was actually forcibly trying to integrate and assimilate Korea into Japanese culture and make the Koreans become Japanese, giving Koreans Japanese names, forcing them to worship at the Shinto shrines, forcing them to use Japanese, and punishing them, making it a criminal offense if they were caught speaking Korean, for example. When I was born, Korea was suffering under the rule of the Japanese imperial government. Japan, on the satanic side, did its absolute best to do evil to the future of Adam nation on the heavenly side. During my birth year of 1920, Korea was in the midst of a most difficult 3-year period. country was in the grip of a terrible famine. Furthermore, in 1919, a powerful independence movement rose up in which a great number of Korean people rebelled against the Japanese rulers, but they failed and suffered terrible punishment. Much blood was shed. 1919 was the first of the three most difficult years. I was born in 1920. 1921 was the third year of that period. Now, we need to know about the independence movement of 1919. And I emphasize that it really came about as a result of the racism of Woodrow Wilson and the Korean people's misreading of Wilson. The idea that, and I think if you look it up, you'll see that he was an out and out racist. Idea was that the Hungarian Empire was kind of a multi-ethnic empire, and so he was saying, okay, which was occurred to him. It did not even there was no concept in his mind that people of color might want to govern themselves or might be capable of governing themselves. Of course, there was Japan, which was on the side of the victors in World War One. But when Koreans saw this, when they heard this news, they thought that, okay, well, this means that America is going to support us in our independence against Japan. So let's rise up, and surely America will come to our aid. Not exactly, in fact, not at all. And the Japanese colonial police, I say colonial, but it was a military police really, massacred people in very terrible ways. But that was providentially very important, because although Japan annexed Korea in 1910 and made it part of Japan, the Messiah could not come to Japan. The Messiah had to come to Korea, but there was no Korea after 1910. Under international law, Korea did not exist as a country. But during this independence movement, briefly and symbolically, Korea, it could be said, God could say, yes, Korea exists as a nation, and I'm sending the Messiah to Korea. And so, Father, of course, was born by the solar calendar, he was born, February 20 something of 1920. And if you work back there, you can say that he was most likely he was conceived in his mother's womb during the period of time when Korea was at least symbolically independent from Japan, and when the nation of Korea at least symbolically existed, so that God could say, okay, here is the country of Korea, and I'm sending the Messiah to Korea. So that 1919 independence movement was critical in the accomplishment of God's providence to send the Messiah. Satan obviously wanted to block this. He did not want God to send the Messiah. And that's why he arranged for Japan to annex Korea in 1910 and make Korea part of the Japanese nation, well, not just Japanese empire, but of the Japanese nation. So, beginning in 1919, Father said that there were three difficult years of famine in Korea. My family suffered for a period of more than just 3 years. They were prepared for 7 years for that most extraordinary moment. Many of my relatives had fled to Manchuria in order to help wage the war of liberation against Japan. A lot of there was a lot of there was a sort of an independence army, Korean independence army that was carrying out guerrilla-style attacks against Japanese forces in Manchuria. That's true. This independence movement had been centered in the Christian churches, which at that time were very patriotic. And yeah, and Protestant Christianity did side with the independence movement, and I think that is one important reason why Christianity has such a strong foothold in Korea today. In the years 1940 to 1944, Japanese persecution against the Christian churches reached a climax. The liberation of Korea by the Allies took place on August 15th, 1945. If that had been postponed even 3 more days until August 17th, there would have been a much, your father's counting Korean style, right? So 15, 16, 17. Remember, in the traditional Korean counting, there is no zero. So 15 is one day, 16 is second day, and 17 is be the third day. There would have been a much greater bloodbath in Korea. More than 170,000 Korean Christians would have been exterminated. The Japanese rulers were in the midst of their most terrible bloodletting against the Christians at that very time. Um, and so, Father, I know in other places, maybe not in this speech, but in other places, also connects this to the justification for the United States using the atomic bomb, the nuclear bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end the war quickly. And of course, give Russia credit as well. Um, we can argue. I think it can be said that Russia, after the first bomb on Hiroshima, said, "Oh, we better hurry up and get in there and fight and see what we can take for ourselves." But anyway, let's not get into that right now. But yes, the nuclear explosions and nuclear bombs did have a lot to do with the ending of the war on August 15th. So, Japanese okay, so you can see that God always allows Satan to do his utmost before the turning point comes. And that's an interesting sentence because I've been thinking of this in terms of the recent military parade in Beijing. And I just wonder if maybe that might have been Satan's best, and that might be the turning point. We'll have to wait and see. I don't know. Upon the liberation of Korea on August 15th, 1945, God intended to initiate a new chapter of dispensational history. At that time, I was working with the underground movement. I had discovered the principle and was preparing for the momentous beginning of that new dispensation. Immediately after the liberation of Korea, the United States set up a military provisional government. Yes, between 45 and 48, South Korea, the southern part of Korea, was ruled by uh, uh, by the U.S. military. As you know, I mean, Japan too then was being ruled by U.S. military, right? And so this was also part of that. The people who were placed in official positions were primarily those who had studied abroad, particularly in the United States and Japan. The Korean Christians who had fought against the Japanese occupation had been underground and had not been linked in any manner with the imperial government. Those who had been outside of the country and who became the main leaders of the provisional government tended to be tolerant or even friendly toward the Japanese. Those were the people who came in to take over the Korean provisional government. So yeah, he's going to get into the Cain Christians and Abel Christians here in the next paragraph. But I think you can see from this paragraph that you just read that the United States made a mistake in deciding sort of because the United States was basically set themselves up as a dictator over Korea. They were picking winners and losers. They were deciding who was going to rule Korea in the future, and they picked people who had been outside of Korea and who had not directly suffered under the Japanese. And I think you can already tell that the father is considering this to be a mistake on the part of the Americans. Korean Christianity was divided into two camps, the Cain and the Abel. God's dispensational will had been for the Abel camp of Christianity, those who had stayed in the country and fought against the Japanese rule, to take prominence over the Cain camp, those who had been abroad. Cain camp should have united with the Able camp and worked together toward their common goal. That would have been an important turning point for the new dispensational era. And Syngman Rhee, who eventually became the founding president of the Republic of Korea, of course, was abroad. He was one of the sort of the Cain type Christians that basically was put in place in Seoul, and not the Able type Christians. But the Cain and Abel camps were accusing each other. Those of the underground considered themselves the only pure Christians and looked with scorn upon the heretics of the other side who had an easy time, who had compromised with the satanic forces. Those people who had worked outside of Korea felt that the Christians who had stayed behind had become heretical because they were so spiritually oriented. There was, and by the way, True Mother's father was an Able type Christian. He remained in Korea, and he was arrested for his faith, for his refusal to worship at a Shinto shrine. He was tortured in prison, and then he was released weeks before the liberation, and actually died. I'm sorry, he died weeks before the liberation. He was released shortly before that because they did not want him to die in prison. Let's see here. There was a great deal of spiritual activity at the time. People were receiving many revelations about the second coming of the Messiah. The two camps were mutually accusing each other as heretics. At that time, I was in the position to bring harmony between the two groups. But one difficulty was that the unification principle is so revolutionary, including the statement that the Messiah will come as a man in the flesh. Because of this situation of Korea, I came to be strongly accused by both Christian camps as a super heretic. Yes, yes, yes. As a super heretic, yes. Of course, Jesus was also a super heretic, I suppose. When the United States military government was established, they sided with the Cain camp of Christianity. Most of those could speak English, but they were, for the most part, very relaxed in their observation of Christian rules. Christian missionaries from America were also in a position of influence at that time. They could directly communicate with the US military government, and they were united with the government, with the military government. And they were largely responsible for pulling in those people who had been studying abroad in the United States and Japan. Because the military government sided with them, the Cain camp became the most powerful and influential group. Within the Able camp, some Christians sensed a change and felt they wanted to ally themselves with the more powerful people, hoping to gain some benefit. What does that mean? The ungodly side, the satanic side, was taking power within the country. More and more, righteous Christianity was in a position to be accused and persecuted. And this has been sort of the tradition in Korean Christianity, and I think it still is true today, that if you want to get ahead within the sort of Christian community, if you want to be a pastor, for example, of a mega church or something like that, then you need to go to America and study in an American seminary. And it's those people who are often chosen and also to become pastors in influential positions. Under these circumstances, let's see here. I don't want to skip anything here. The position to be accusing person. God's disposition will was to use the momentous victory of the Able camp in World War II as a launching pad for the movement of the Messiah. And at that time, the United States could basically do anything that it wanted. It was the only country with nuclear weapons. It had just won a war, and it did not fight the war on its own territory. So Europe was in ruins. Russia was in ruins. Japan was in ruins. Basically, the United States stood head and shoulders, and more than that, all the way down to the knees above all the countries of the world. And not only that, but the United States, with soldiers coming back after World War II, enjoyed a very strong consumer-oriented society, and so the economy was growing like gangbusters. So the United States, if the United States had united with Father at that time, in the 45 to 52 period, if Father could have done what he wanted during that period, if America had helped him do what he wanted, if what the Messiah wanted, he could have established Chunuk at that time. Now, I think these opportunities come around. That wasn't just the only period. I think another period happened, in my opinion, around 2012. And I think again, if Hak Ja Han had done what she was supposed to, and put the second king and his brother Kukchinim in charge, then they could have uh, brought about Chandragupta much more easily and much more quickly than what we're going through now. And perhaps a third, I think, opportunity is certainly going to come, but we are, I think, on our way towards that. I don't think it's quite here yet, but I'm sure it will come. When that time comes, let's make sure that everybody does what they're supposed to do. Okay. However, the United States military government, working together with the Cain type Christianity, took that chance away and moved more and more toward the satanic side. So my position became more and more difficult. Under those, so more and more difficult means that he had to go to North Korea. Right? South Korean Christianity had failed, and God is fair. He gives Cain a chance as well, and so he had to go to North Korea to then proselytize there and to build a uh, faith community there, which he did. But then, of course, we all know what happened after that. Under those circumstances, I was quietly approaching prominent religious leaders who had had spiritual experiences. And these were the John the Baptist mission people. I knew there were such people, and I was trying to find allies among them. There were some Christians who had received spiritual messages directly from heaven and who truly tried to know the will of God through the Bible. Such people became my supporters. Thus, I was pulling those Jew alike people from both camps, the spiritualist groups as well as the traditional Christian denominations. Those groups began to think that Reverend Moon was taking their flocks away. Thus, they began to persecute me, wanting to shield themselves from me. The confrontation started during the earliest days, right after the Korean liberation. So the two groups had one purpose in common: opposing Reverend Moon, this new super heretic. They could unite upon that. They were able to utilize the power of the military government because it is easy to turn political power against a new religion. And of course, we know about that, don't we? In this way, God's great expectation after World War II to launch the new dispensation was thwarted. Because of the failure of Christianity and the United States, New Beginning was taken over by the satanic forces. If nothing had been done then, both North and South Korea would have been completely turned over to Satan. That was Korea's destiny at the time. The 38th parallel was already the dividing line, and North Korea was in the hands of the communists. They were planning to bring South Korea under communism as well. The US military government was naive and could easily have become the prey of the machinations and conspiracies of the North. Luckily, however, the president of the South, Syngman Rhee, understood the situation and strongly opposed the position of the military government. He completely detached South Korea from the North, and in 1948, South Korea declared its independence. The Republic of Korea was created. So I don't think he goes into this right now, but the United Nations had a plan for Korea. So the idea was that there was going to be elections, right? And elections, everyone, both in the South Korea and North Korea, both sides of the 30th bill would be able to participate in these elections. But the North was refusing to allow the UN staff or UN people to go in to do the work necessary to prepare for those elections. The UN staff could not go north up from the 30th parallel, but stopped at the 30th parallel. And Syngman Rhee realized that this was what was happening, that North Korea was basically a lost cause, And so he insisted that South Korea form a government, and that happened August 15th, 1945. And of course, North Korea also formed its government 77 years ago yesterday, actually. Yesterday was the 9th, yes. 77 years ago yesterday on September 9th. So the Republic of Korea was created then in 1948. Thus, the division of the Korean Peninsula into North and South was established. The North proclaimed its own communist government while the South declared its independence under the protection of the U.S. military. That was the difficult beginning point of the world dispensation. Korea was like a microcosm of the world with a very complicated situation. The major portion of the new Korean government under Syngman Rhee was a hand-me-down group from the military provisional government. That means they were mostly Kane-type Christians. Some people remained in the positions of power. For that reason, Reverend Moon's dispensational position became even more difficult and narrowed down. The reason I'm giving you this important explanation of the genesis of Korea is this. According to the will of God, the Messianic movement must begin upon a national foundation. In the time of Jesus, it was supposed to be the nation of Israel. In the 20th century, Korea was chosen as the nation, with Christianity in the same position as Judaism 2,000 years ago. Upon that foundation, the Messianic movement was supposed to be launched. However, just like 2,000 years ago, the Korean nation, that newly independent nation, took the position of Cain. Furthermore, it was run by the Cain-type elements within Christianity. Thus, the government united with Cain-type Christianity in persecuting and trying to destroy the Messianic movement. Unless you understand this particular situation, you cannot know how certain things happened within the unification movement, such as how it started and why it went to the worldwide scale without establishing the national foundation in Korea. The reason I entered North Korea voluntarily right after liberation, knowing that it was a communist satanic nation, was that I had to set the condition of trying my best to restore it to God's side. Naturally, after I went there, I had to suffer to an incredible degree. In Jesus' time, the disloyalty of the 12 disciples brought about incredible indemnity conditions. Jesus set the special 40-day period to bring all his lost disciples back. By the same token, in the New Jerusalem, the third Israel of Korea, half of the nation had been given away to the satanic side. So I had to go there physically and try to restore that part of Korea back to God. And I hope that people, in the Only Begotten Daughter Church are watching this at some point, because they have a very their theology has a very twisted and self-serving explanation of this father going to North Korea. But this is father's explanation, which I think rings true, rings very true. As you know, the capital of North Korea is Pyongyang. That city was once known as the Jerusalem of the East. It was really the Mecca for Christianity within Korea. The most devout and ardent Christians had been there. Therefore, I had to go and preach there, trying to bring some of those people out of North Korea. In the name of Jesus' 12 disciples, I had to try to restore those devout Christians to freedom rather than let them become the prey of communism. I began my work in the midst of the communist regime in Pyongyang and gained many disciples. When I was thrown into jail, I preached to the people there, and I won more disciples. Inside the jail, I had an incredible network of communication among those devout Christians who had been waiting for the coming of the Messiah. Amazing spiritual phenomena occurred during those days. Many people had been told the Messiah is coming. Some were constantly receiving messages about who I was, and they were given my cell number as well as the best method of communication. As you know, the Korean War began in 1950. For several years preceding that, the communists in North Korea were preparing with desperate determination to take over all of South Korea. It was during that time that I was working in North Korea, primarily in prison. General MacArthur directed the Incheon landing and broke through the enemy lines, allowing the UN forces to move north all the way to Hungnam and to open the gates of the prison where I was being held. Truly, that was a holy march to the north. this morning, wasn't it? Yeah, this morning's, or no, I'm sorry, yesterday's King's Report. I had a speech by Father given in 1970 about the events leading up to his liberation from Hong Nam. Because of the devastating effects of the Korean War, the foundation of the new independent government was demolished. Many rich people in Korea fled the country when they saw the war coming. Likewise, Christian ministers wanted to get their families out of the country. Thus, the leadership inside of Korea was full of confusion. This chaotic situation gave the Unification Church an opportunity for a new beginning. It was a chance for us to make a new foundation, even to the point where we could have an impact on Christian society and the government. Thus, the confusion and chaotic situation of Korean society at that time could be utilized by God. It was the opportunity for the heavenly dispensation to be launched again. And I often say that I think that chaos and confusion are good, because what that means is that the established order has broken down. And when that happens, then God can create something new. By 1954, I was able to lay sufficient foundation to organize the official church under the name of the Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity. Still, there was incredible opposition and persecution from both the government and established Christianity. So I don't know if he mentions this here, but we know now that HSA UWC was established to indemnify the failure of Korean Christianity to accept the Messiah. So Father needed some Christian foundation. The Messiah comes on the foundation of Christianity. So he needed some foundation. And Korean Christianity would not provide that foundation, so he created his own foundation, Christian Foundation, which is HSA UWC. And then that HSA UWC had a 40-year mission, 40 to 43-year mission until 1997. And that in 1997, then, which was more than 10 years after this speech, Father said, okay, now we're going to close the HSA UWC and we're going to have the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification. And HSA UWC has completed its mission. And the Family Federation was given the mission then to create God-centered families. The Father had blessed many families, and then those families then would, through the FFWPU, then would become God-centered families where God could dwell. Of course, unfortunately, today's Family Federation, even though they have taken the name, they have not taken that mission. In fact, all the former blessed central families who are in the Family Federation today have been taken back into the satanic lineage, and the mission of the original mission of the Family Federation is being accomplished in the World Peace and Unification Sanctuary by the second king of Chenuguk, Young Jae-mun. So they have the name. The second king is actually doing the work of the Family Federation. So still there was incredible opposition and persecution from both the government and established Christianity. 2,000 years ago, Judaism was supposed to be in the able position and guide the Israel nation and the government of power. That was the original lineup. By the same token, the Unification Church was supposed to be in the able position and guide the Korean government and influence society. That was what was supposed to happen. Now, influence how? Right? Right now, Hak Ja Han is being charged with trying to influence the government through bribery. But Father's idea of influence is not bribery. What is it? I'm sure you all know. It's education. All right? Education. Always Father is talking about educating people, educating people, educating people. He's not talking about giving people Gucci bags, all right? Or whatever bag it was. I don't know if it was Gucci or some other crazy brand, but yeah. But now, she's probably in a heap of trouble because of the way that she tried to influence. And also, she was trying to influence the government for personal gain, and also was against the uh, father's principle. Right. Anyway, let's continue here. Uh, Influence that was supposed to happen. Okay, by the time 1960 came along, persecution and opposition were at their most rampant and climatic point in Korea. For God, however, the year 1960 was the turning point for the beginning of the new era. New era. Until Satan has done his utmost, God's turning point will not come. God has to allow Satan to do his absolute best, then he will have to give up. The climax of persecution came in this way. The American missionaries, who were primarily Presbyterian and Methodist, had been working in Korea and had built some universities. One of them was Ewha University, a women's university, and the other was a man's school, and there was an all-male school, in other words, Yonsei University. So Ewha was an all-female university, Yonsei was an all-male university. A large number of students from those two schools joined the Unification Church at that time. Thus, the government, as well as the Christian missionaries, saw this as a dangerous thing, and they began to pursue and develop their opposition against the Unification Church. One day, those two universities announced the expulsion of all students and professors who were members of the Unification Church, which caused a big uproar. Then they recruited some former members of the church, 12 in particular, to join with the Korean government and work in opposing us. You know, I saw one person had created a sort of a, what do you call it? Well, a collection of news articles that were published about this time. And it was interesting to see those news articles because in the beginning, the media was supporting the religious freedom rights of the students and professors who were being expelled. But then suddenly one day, you could see that there was a total change. And all of a sudden, began to attack the Unification Church as a sex cult or something like that. And by the way, to make things clear, Father was never officially charged with sexual impropriety in respect to the Ewha University students or Yonsei University in respect to this event that happened in 1955. I read the court records that were at that time preserved in the National Archives. I read a copy of the court records, the final verdict. And the charge against Father was draft evasion. And the final sentence on Father was that he was not guilty, not guilty. So he was held in custody for 3 months, from July 4th until October 4th. And he was released on October 4th, having been found not guilty of draft evasion. I mean, he was, and his defense was, well, I was in a North Korean prison camp. You know, I couldn't exactly sign up for the draft in South Korea. I'm sorry. That was the defense, and the court accepted that defense, and he was found not guilty. So, but for 3 months, and he was in the Sodaemun prison. This is a prison. I don't think it exists anymore. But Sodaemun is still, of course, is a neighborhood or part of a section of Seoul. Literally, it means the West Gate, section of Seoul. And there used to be a prison there, which was, I think, originally built by the Japanese. But Father was incarcerated there for 3 months in 1955. So, so then 12, let's see, where are we now? Then they recruited some former members, 12 in particular, to join the Korean government and work in opposing us. Under such circumstances, the heavenly dispensation was to celebrate the holy wedding of true parents as well. So that happened in 1955. And so now he's skipping to the holy wedding of the true parents, which happened, of course, in 1960. So make sure that we understand that there was this 5-year difference under such circumstances. But still, that persecution continued even after he was released, as well as the first. The heavenly was to celebrate the holy blessing of true parents, as well as the first 12 of the 36 couples. The 36 couple blessing actually happened in three stages: 12, 12, and 12. The blessing of the 36 couples was accomplished in the midst of such incredible turmoil. Those couples were being pulled away from the satanic camp and brought over to the heavenly side. This was the historical beginning of the blessing. First, the 36 couples, then the 72 couples, 124 couples, 430 couples, and so on, so forth. All along, society and government were resisting. Meanwhile, God was opening up and expanding the territory of heaven. And 124, by the way, the reason for 124 was that that was the number of member states of the United Nations when that blessing took place. So it represented the world at that time. During this period, a new reputation came to be attached to the Unification Church and Reverend Moon. People began to realize that only with the same quality of commitment as the members of our church could they hope to win over communism. Furthermore, they saw that the only truly powerful patriotic organization was the Unification Church. That sort of consensus developed. By the time we launched the first celebration of God's Day in 1968, the Unification Foundation was firmly laid. It was obvious that no one in Korea could take away that rock-solid foundation. Yes, God's Day was declared on January 1st by the solar calendar of 1968. At that time, we were able to launch a powerful opposition against communism. The Unification Church was the only organization with a truly winning strategy. In 1969, all the blessed couples of Korea were mobilized for 3 years. Some of them even put their children into orphanages and then took off for unknown destinations, dedicating themselves for those 3 years. At that time, there was a great deal of criticism in society and among the parents of the blessed couples saying, what Reverend Moon is doing is unreasonable. He married my son and daughter to live well and have children, but now he is forcing them to live like beggars, even throwing the children into orphanages as they go out on this mobilization. But my position was that our primary goal had to be to save the country. Unless the country is saved, there can be no secure family or individual. Therefore, all the blessed couples were mobilized for the sake of the salvation of the country. And the early couples our senior couples. They don't talk about it a lot, but they went through some extremely difficult situation. And Father's not mentioning here about the economic situation, but there was extreme poverty within the church, a kind of poverty that you and I don't know, have never experienced. True Mother talks somewhere in one of her testimonies. It's actually in the testimony that was published in Korea, where she talks about the difficulty of putting together enough food some days just to feed Father. And that, of course, was always the priority, to feed Father. And she's talking about how, of course, they went into debt to secure enough rice and that kind of thing, and so forth. But and she also testifies to how Spirit World often came through with miraculous events to help them endure through that period. But also this mobilization, yes, of the Blessed Angel families was an incredible sacrifice that far beyond anything that any of us have experienced in the West. Some couples knew they could not take care of their children at that time, so they gathered up their belongings and took their babies to their parents' homes and left them, sometimes even without permission of those parents. They thought, if my parents take care of the baby, good. If not, he will die. From a purely human point of view, there were many tragic scenes. Many of the children were old enough to know their parents and capable of talking, When the parents tried to leave them behind, some of the children cried out, "Mommy, where are you going? Don't leave me." Those mothers were weeping and saying, "I have to go in order to save the country. I must follow the will of God. He will protect you. You must stay and I must go." They fervently prayed and told God, "My children are in your hands. I go according to your will." And I often wonder whether, well, I don't think we have to wonder. I often repent that I myself don't have this level of commitment to God's providence. But sometimes we just have to pick up and go, right? And I think it's really tragic, especially when we see people in the Family Federation right now who know that they are serving Satan, but make excuses that, oh, well, I have a family, I have children, I have a mortgage, I have credit cards, I have student debt, this, that, and the other thing. And all that is true. And it would be a tremendous sacrifice for them to pick up and leave. But I just wonder, if we measure that sacrifice against the sacrifice that our senior couples made in late 1960s and early 1970s, um, you know, how does it measure up? That's just something that I sometimes wonder about. Yesterday, I spoke about the life of sacrifice and said that every member of the Unification Church, whether blessed or not, is in the position of an offering or sacrifice on the altar of God. And here, of course, the reference here is to Isaac's situation when he placed himself on the altar. By 1970, there were many blessed couples, but still, the life of the Unification Church members was an absolutely wandering life, always moving, living out of suitcases. Each year on my birthday, I did not celebrate with a feast, but rather I would fast. That was the condition for our members for many years. I began this road myself from the very bottom, from the laborer's position, and climbed up step by step. And you see in Father's autobiography that he worked, well, actually, he didn't work. In the beginning, he was a beggar. He was a beggar. I think it's in the autobiography where he talks about where he was actually standing on the street. He was one of many beggars standing on the street, each one with their tin can, and just hoping that someone will toss a coin into their particular can. And then a friend that he had met in Tokyo uh, recognized him and took him home from that. So anyway, and then of course he also worked on the docks of Busan Harbor for a while. Yeah, so he was a dock worker for a while, according to Father's autobiography. I did not celebrate with a feast, but rather I would fast. That was the condition for our members for many years. I began this road myself from the very bottom, from the laborer's position, and climbed up step by step. I climbed once to the highest and most glorious position, but that was lost. So I had to go all the way back down to the very bottom to make a new beginning. Step by step, I had to make the restoration. I never wore formal attire, a tie or a nice suit as I do now. The workman doesn't dress up every day to go to work, and I always dressed like a workman. Until 1970, I even wore humble and coarse attire to Sunday service. I preached in such clothing. I'm sure you find it hard to imagine such a time. Likewise, I never ate my meals at a table. I would just eat humble things like rice balls and radish, picking them up with my hands, not even using a spoon or chopsticks. That was part of the road of indemnity. By 1970, the blessed families were in the midst of a total 3-year mobilization for the salvation of the Korean nation. Now there is one chapter remaining, the total mobilization of the blessed couples for the sake of the world. After that 3-year mobilization in Korea, public opinion was turned around that virtually everyone recognized the quality of dedication of the Unification Church members. They knew that only with such devout and dedicated activities on the part of the Korean people could their nation be preserved from communism. I want you to understand that those who sacrifice the most are the ones who will inherit the blessing of God. That is the cardinal rule of the heavenly dispensation. In Korea at that time, the Unification Church sacrificed more than the government or any of the people in society, including the established Christian churches. Therefore, God had to pour out blessings upon the Unification Church. By the end of that 3-year mobilization period in 1972, well, let's see, it's already time, isn't it? Okay. So, all right, so that's a good stopping place, actually. So, let me see here. Oh, it's going, can't find my cursor. So, a lot of information there, and I'm really happy that I'm really grateful